we're not really aware of. So there was a study, for example, looking at handshakes. And I think it was an Israeli study. Men shaking hands of men shaking hands of women, and the other way around. And what they found is that people bring their hand to their nose, too close. So they touch their face, they bring their hand close to their nose when they have shaken hands with same-sex partners.
Is that right, eh?
Not with the opposite sex. And they think it has to do with testing anxiety or testing dominance or testing rivalry.
God only knows what sort of information we're picking up on the olfactory front. Like a lot of that could be unconscious. I mean, I know, for example, that if you give women t-shirts, laundered t-shirts have been worn one day by men, and you ask them to rate the odor preference, the women prefer the t-shirts that symmetrical men wore. So, and that's obviously not in any sense a conscious olfactory preference for like the concept of symmetry. It's just built right into the olfaction.
So we've seen now during the COVID crisis that now that we're coming out of the crisis, everyone is very happy that we have physical interaction with others. And I think one of the things we have missed is probably smell. So you can talk with your grandparents over Zoom, but that's not the same as visiting them and seeing them and smelling them. I once...
there's a deep sense of familiarity and memory that's associated with that. You know, when my wife's mother died, my wife took one of her scarves and she kept it in a little jar. And now and then she'd take it out, and she could detect the smell of her mother on that. And then about 5 years later, she said, "I can't smell my mother on this anymore," and she just got rid of it. But that was you know that smell is so evocative, right? And it can produce a kind of a longing and also a sense of deep comfort.
Yeah, but it is also, you know, I was once on a flight before COVID. On a flight to Tokyo, I was sitting next to a businessman, and he was going to Tokyo for a meeting of a couple of hours, and then he would fly back. And I said, "You really feel that you need to fly to Tokyo for that? You could do this virtually?" He said, "No. It's a multi-million-dollar deal, and I want to see these people. I want to smell these people. I want to see them up close." He felt that all this bodily interaction was awfully important to him, and that is how we are. We have remained primates in that regard, and olfaction is largely unconscious. We don't even have words for it. We cannot even express what's happening, but it's largely unconscious. But it's extremely important to us.
Yeah, well, that's the problem with virtualizing the world to some degree, is we don't know. Well, like we talked about earlier, does female pattern antisocial behavior scale on social media? And if the answer to that is yes, it's like, well, that's revolutionary because it's never scaled before. And so we have no idea what these virtual environments are doing to us by interfering in unexpected ways with our embodiment.
Yeah. But you know, I just recently saw that on Twitter there's far fewer women than men. It's mostly men who do this Twittering and Facebook and so on.
Yeah, well, I think that what's happened on Twitter, you know, I might be accused of tormenting my theory past its justification. I think that the fact that there's no direct face-to-face confrontation between men on social media platforms facilitates a female style of antisocial behavior between men on social media platforms.
Okay.
Yeah. Because you see this reputation savaging, and it's like, well, you don't do that in face-to-face contact with a man, because if I've seen people repeatedly, hundreds of times, not the same person, but say something on Twitter that no one would ever say face-to-face to another adult male even once in their life. Because it would immediately cause, well, a movement towards physical aggression, if not an immediate punch. But that's not there. And so then you think, well, the fact that that's not there, what does that do to the communication pattern? And the answer is, we have no idea. God only knows what it does. So maybe I could close with a couple of general questions, unless there's something else that you would like to Okay. So, I'm always curious about people's intellectual heroes. Like I mentioned, some of the people who've been really influential to me. My viewers know Freud, Jung, Piaget, Panksepp, Jeffrey Gray, like a handful of animal experimentalists, some philosophers like Nietzsche, Solzhenitsyn. For you, like, who's been signal in your intellectual development and really shaped your thinking?
Well, the founders of ethology, which were Nico Tinbergen and Konrad Lorenz, they were very important. I think they're very different characters, but they were very important for my intellectual development. Ed Wilson, I think, was very important. I think Wilson, and I was also influenced in the beginning by Desmond Morris's book, The Naked Ape.
Yeah.
Even though now, if I can easily mention quite a few things that are not correct in that book in terms of theories, but the way he wrote it and sort of irreverent way of writing about the human species and sort of also making fun.
Just the idea that this comparison between species was interesting ethically and morally and emotionally, that was kind of revolutionary. He did a good job of that.
Yeah, his book was extremely successful, and partly because he had this tone of mocking humans a little bit, and I think he did a real good job at that. So yeah, those were my early influences, I think,
Yeah, well, one of the things that's so interesting about your writing, I think, is apart from its remarkable approachability, which I really think is a gift, is that it's also non-naively positive and optimistic, which is so cool to see, because that combination doesn't occur that often. Often people who are optimistic are kind of naive, but you're a hardcore biologist, sort of in the scientific trenches in the real sense, and yet I always come away from your books with a fundamentally positive, they have positive consequences on me. And the fact that I think your work on the biological basis of moral development is, I think it's of what would you say, it's kind of epoch level philosophical significance. It's such a
I'm an optimist by nature. And even though I started studying violence and aggression, because that was the topic at the time, everyone was studying aggressive behavior, I very soon switched to conflict resolution because I found it actually more interesting than the aggression itself.
Well, that's also extremely cool, that you got in through the darkness, so to speak. But the consequence of that was that you actually learned that aggression and violence weren't the fundamental basis of social interaction, and that reconciliation and competence and empathy and long-term planning, all of that actually turns out to be more fundamental and important. Yeah, that's so